And we will go ahead and dive in. Folks, welcome very much. We're excited to have you with us today. I am Valen Brown. I'm the CEO of the Alliant Educational Foundation, based out of San Diego, but doing work across the state of California. And you are here today for a topic that honestly continues to sort of be so top of mind. We are hearing about artificial intelligence pretty much everywhere you turn, from political discourse to in sort of the therapeutic context to teen and mental health issues to pop culture. And what we realized is we really wanted to take a deeper dive into the artificial intelligence topic and really apply it to the lens of therapy, both in terms of the work that we're doing with therapists and those clients that are also being served through the work that is happening. And that's a big part of what brings us together today. We essentially are doing typically quarterly salon sessions. These are sort of online, live, small panel discussions around topics of interest. And I'm happy to share that this is the first of 2026, and it has resonated very well with folks across the board. So we appreciate having you with us. If you are not aware, the Alliant Educational Foundation is hosting today's session. We are essentially the charitable partner that works with Alliant University and the California School of Professional Psychology, really focused at a high level on education and mental health and sort of building bridges between underserved communities, universities, and other partners to do that work. Today's format, very straightforward. We'll do introductions in just a moment and plan to give you a sense of who our three panelists and our moderator are today, which we are very excited to have with us. And after we do a panel discussion, we'll make sure that we reserve time for Q&A from the audience as well. To be able to do that, we'll ask you to use the chat function. So you'll notice in the bottom of your Zoom field, depending on your device, you may have to mouse over or you may have it just on the screen. We'll use the chat function throughout the session, but we will hold most of those questions to the end of the discussion today. We do have at present a good number of folks in. We've also muted your microphones just to make sure we don't have background noise. But do feel free to use that chat field to log questions throughout the session, and we'll make sure that we keep at least 10 or 15 minutes towards the end to be able to field those questions from everybody. So that takes care of our housekeeping. And I will go ahead and I just wanted to do a brief introduction of our moderator today. Today we have with us Dr. Milena Esherick. Milena, thank you very, very much for being with us. But let me give just a little quick bio for you before you share some bios on our presenters. Dr. Esherick grew up in Washington, D.C., earning a bachelor's degree from Princeton and a PhD in clinical community psychology from the University of Maryland. Has taught, trained, and consulted and published on issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion for more than 25 years, with a lot of hats, essentially, as a professor, mentoring and educated graduate students with a focus on their development as culturally responsive practitioners and researchers, as a licensed psychologist practicing psychotherapy with diverse populations and individuals and couples, and as a leader has served as a senior administrator and chief diversity officer at two institutions, Alliant University and the California School of Professional Psychology and the University of Maryland. And she's a wonderful board member with the Alliant Educational Foundation as well. So Milena, thank you very much for being with us today, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Valen. Hello to everyone. It's great to see so many folks here for this very informative and educative session. I am delighted to moderate this very esteemed panel. So let me get right in and introduce them to you, and then we'll launch some questions. Let me start with Dr. Milena Esherick. She's a licensed psychologist, educator, and consultant with more than 20 years of leadership experience across higher education, healthcare, and behavioral health startups. She's the Associate Director of the Master of Science in Counseling program at Kaiser Permanente School of Allied Health Sciences, previously served as Director of the Counseling Psychology program at the Wright Institute. She consults with early-stage startups and digital mental health companies, helping to assess ideas, shape strategy, and explore the potential of generative AI to strengthen clinical training and behavioral health care. Welcome, Milena.
So happy to be here.
Dr. Anastasia Kim is a licensed psychologist, a tenured professor, an award-winning author, and co-founder and chief clinical officer of AARI Care, which is an AI native operating system advancing mental health care, training, and supervision. She has over 20 years of leadership experience across higher education, clinical practice, and global DEI initiatives. And her work sits at the intersection of mental health, equity, and innovation, focusing on building scalable, equity-centered systems that strengthen human connections. Welcome, Anastasia.
Thanks so much, Kamea. Wonderful to be here.
And Dr. Steven Thorp is board certified in clinical psychology. He's a licensed psychologist, currently serves as a distinguished professor at CSPP, Alliant University. He has particular expertise in working with veterans, sexual assault survivors, and older adults with PTSD. He's been awarded more than $6 million in federal grant funding to investigate the clinical outcomes of psychotherapy. And his work includes evaluating technology to monitor and ameliorate PTSD symptoms. He has a great interest in the potential for AI in clinical work. Thanks for being here, Steven.
Thank you for having me.
So let's jump right in. My first question is sort of a two-parter. What is the lay of the land right now in terms of AI and therapy? And what's working? What's effective? What's emerging that's making a positive difference? So what's the lay of the land? Give us a sense of the overall scene, landscape, and what's working. Maybe Dr. Kim, would you be willing to jump in first?
Yes, thank you so much. What's the lay of the land? We're in a very dizzying sort of state, frenzied state. It is impossible to keep up with the advancements and products and things that are coming out on all fronts, on research, on sort of product, on regulatory, on policy. We are trying to fly the plane while building it on all fronts. Every day I wake up and there's yet another news on all of these fronts, including the product. So it is both has had a very dizzying effect on me and also very exciting. And so when I think about AI, actually in working with mental health right now, I want to also just frame all this by saying that, a lot of what I'm sharing is as somebody who is sitting at the intersection of education and training. As a clinician, I've been seeing patients close to 30 years. And then also as somebody who is starting our own startup as a co-founder and builder in this space. And so starting the earlier to 2025, since then, I've been building RE Care. And what it is essentially is an end-to-end operating system for the entire mental health ecosystem. I say that to share that my input is really from that place of learning as I am doing this work. So from where I sit, AI is actually working in mental health right now. What is working? I'm not really looking at the chatbots or replacement models, the synthetic relationships, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I'm looking, the strengths that I'm looking at are what we as clinicians already know that drives treatment outcomes, which is in the clinician's skill and also in the therapeutic relationship. So I think for me, as I've been building this product, we offer the providers, providers, clinicians, the clients, the supervisors, the trainees. And so supervision in particular at scale is, to me, has the potential to have the clearest wins and strengths. And there's a real bottleneck in mental health right now that isn't just psychotherapy, but it's also high access to high quality supervision. supervision. And in building what I've been building, we wanted to ensure that supervisors such as myself have the ability to review sessions with AI support that surfaces patterns, including potential risks. So the objective here isn't about replacing supervisors such as myself, but to sharpen our lens, to sharpen our oversight, and ultimately for us to be able to provide better support to our trainees and in turn to the clinical work. So supervision, I think, is an exciting place of potential strength and win. Between session care is another area I have found to be traditionally something that is a little bit weak on the psychotherapy end because there's so much gap and time. If I'm seeing my patients once a week or sometimes even less frequently than that, patients often have nothing between sessions. And with what we're building and with some of what is coming out in the landscape, the potential to have an extension of care between the sessions, I think is tremendously promising. So this isn't AI therapy again. It is about continuity of care with human clinical oversight. And then I think the final area that I found to be really promising in the era of AI and behavioral health is something that humans are simply really not that great at, which is really tracking large volumes of data and pattern across time. And as clinicians, I work from session to session. But the reality is AI can track longitudinal signals so much more accurately and robustly than what I can as a human. And that includes everything from quality of therapeutic engagement, symptoms, behavioral changes, impacts of meds, and so much more. So those are the things that allow for early detection, early intervention potentially, and ideally prevention before things really escalate. So to be able to extrapolate those patterns and AI to leverage that capability, I think is tremendous. So I'll just, to sum up all three, like I think AI is working best not when it tries to replace the therapist, but rather when it is enhancing our clinical judgment, increasing continuity of care, and helping us as clinicians see patterns that we might otherwise miss that can ultimately impact the quality of care for our patients.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, because you mentioned a number of really intriguing areas, could you talk a little bit, Anastasia, about how, for those of us who are more naive, who are newer to this, how AI can help with between session care? What is an example of what that looks like?
So between session care, I don't know about some of you, I'm sure you could relate. At the end of session, I will say, George, between now and the next session, let's focus on X, Y, Z. I might even assign homework. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist and I treat mostly anxiety, depression, and neurodiversity. And so there might be some things that I would like my client George to do between sessions. And George is very motivated, but as soon as he leaves my session, it's hard to track what he's going to do. And also to hard to be sort of stay accountable. So some of the things that could happen between sessions with myself and my patient is for us to live, if you will, in the same shared platform so that what I communicate in terms of recommendations, things that George might track, maybe homework, maybe I am assigning I don't know, measurements such as the GAD-7 or PHQ-9 or whatever that might do that is easily accessible to George, that he isn't doing his own journal on the side, that the journal capacity or mood logging is something that happens within the same platform that I share with George. All of that gets synthesized easily without George trying to communicate all of that so that when I see George next week, the AI has been doing its part to synthesize and curate all the activity that George has done so that when I see George next week, at the very top, I'm able to get a very clean and crisp summary of all the activity versus George spending the first 20 minutes, a very costly 20 minutes, telling me what's been going on. Yeah. And for me
That's
then to be able to go back, to be able to track that. So
Mhm.
it really expedites and diminishes and attenuates some of the burden of communicating and let me pull out my notebook, let me email that to you. There's so many fragmentations where things are being documented, myself as a provider and George as my patient. And leveraging AI to create that connectivity so that we're able to get to really the core of the work as expeditiously and as quality driven as possible.
that's very helpful. Thank you for that. Dr. Thorpe, I saw you, or Stephen, I saw your head nodding a bunch as Anastasia was
The
speaking.
whole time. Yeah, Dr. Kim made so many great points. Um, in terms of the state of AI, it's thrilling and horrifying is the state of AI.
Mm.
And the best word is ambivalence that we're feeling, and you see this in many surveys of Americans. You see it in surveys of psychologists. You see it among surveys of clients too. That we are both very excited about the possibilities of AI, and at the same time very concerned about a number of issues about AI. And so there's that ambivalence. And our clients are using AI. All of us that see clients know that our clients are using AI, and we actually should make this part of our intakes, part of our standard first session with clients that we ask about their use, because most of them are using it in some capacity. This section is on the highs, and so there's lots of concerns, but I'm going to focus on some of the exciting parts. The most exciting part that got me interested in technology and mental health in the first place is that we have these fantastic treatments. Dr. Kim talked about CBT. We have CBTs for almost everything, and they're really effective treatments. And yet, so few people get access to those treatments. The people in rural settings, 2 hours east of us here in San Diego, have a very hard time getting medical health care and mental health care. And there are many marginalized communities that have a hard time getting these excellent treatments. So AI and other technologies can provide access to people that otherwise wouldn't get it. And the technologies are 24/7. They're across space and time. They can be accessed at any time. They can be accessed by hundreds or thousands of people at the same time. That's amazing that we can scale it that way. AI doesn't get bored. It doesn't get tired. It mostly remembers things. Like there are some nice advantages to that. The technology can be really useful for issues like that. It's really convenient, and for a lot of clients, it feels like this private conversation. As we'll talk about with the lows, it's not private at all. You're sharing all of your most intimate thoughts with the corporation, but it feels that way to a lot of people. I'll just touch on a couple of other things that are exciting. Some of us have used interpreters in our sessions because we don't speak the same language as our client. And that's great. It's really useful. It's much better than not having an interpreter or translator in session. However, it's really fraught with potential issues in terms of confidentiality. A lot of times your client and the interpreter come from the same small community in your city. So there's lots of issues there. AI, of course, can translate very well, and so that's one of the big perks of it. And it's not just language; it's idioms and etiquette and other things that it can be trained on. One of the issues that I love that Dr. Kim was talking about is between sessions. So one of our first year students here in San Diego, he and his partner developed technology that's all about between sessions. It's using AI to maximize the homework that we assign clients and the journaling that clients do. And I'll talk about this with the cons too, about AI scribes in general. A lot of our colleagues are using this to write their progress notes, for example. That's great, except when you realize that you have to record the session to do that, and then you think about all the downsides. We'll get to that. The upside is that you can summarize things, you can have a nice case conceptualization done this way, and you can help clients between sessions in ways that we haven't been able to do before. That's very exciting. The other thing that Dr. Kim touched on that I love is supervision. We can literally have simulated clients now, and in fact, we're using that on campus right now, where our new students can interact with AI, an avatar that's AI driven, in a way that we never could have done even a few years ago. That's really exciting. It's a nice kind of testing for their skills as they're starting out. So I'll end there, but there's lots of exciting things going on.
Love it. And I'll hone in on just one of the many interesting things you said and ask you to say a bit more around serving communities and clients that are remote, that are, 2 hours east of San Diego. And how does that happen? How does AI support that?
So literally for years and years, we've had clients in El Centro, for example, which is about 2 hours east of here.
Mm-hmm.
And there were essentially no mental health services to speak of there for the past 15 years. There are very few providers out there, and the ones that are out there are overwhelmed by the demand. For a client to come into San Diego for a weekly psychotherapy session means they have to drive 2 hours each way to do that. That's not practical, even before gas was $5 plus a gallon. And it takes time, and it takes childcare, and it takes other issues. To access AI right now is free. It's easy to access. As we'll talk about with the downside, it's not designed for psychotherapy for the most part, but people are using it that way, and it can be helpful. We actually know that AI that is designed for it can be therapeutic. So it provides access, again, 24/7, access for folks that otherwise wouldn't get anything. And something is better than nothing for a lot of these things. We'll talk about the downsides, but it's access.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steven. Milena.
Wow, my colleagues are amazing and have done such a great job summarizing the field. I'll build off of two areas. One is accessibility of chatbots for the general public, and the literature does suggest that that may be the number one use case for how people are using large language models like ChatGPT for emotional support, for interpersonal support and conflict, how to work through difficulties in life, and they are reporting that they're finding it helpful. Some of the literature suggests they're finding it as helpful or more helpful than their human therapist. So to me, that is really important information to pay attention to. How are people using it? When are they finding it helpful? We also know from the literature that AI and large language models are kind of superhuman in their power to empathize or to simulate empathy. And we know that that's one of the core foundational components of what makes for good therapy and positive client outcomes. So that's interesting. How do we harness that? I think there's potential there. The other piece that I wanted to build off of and highlight is the capacity of AI to support clinical training and supervision and the student experience. And I'll share a bit of a personal story and see if others can relate to this. When I went to grad school many years ago, but I think the pattern continues, kind of the traditional model is we read a lot of books, but we don't practice a lot of skills. So we get this, knowledge bank, but not the procedural learning and how to ask questions, how to respond when a client behaves in X, Y, and Z way. And we also don't get direct observation of our clinical work. So we see 10, 20 clients in a week, and then we go and report to our human supervisor, here's what happened, here's my understanding of the session, please help me improve. So we're not getting direct observation of our clinical work, and we're not getting direct practice role play experience. And we know both of those things are really, really important for developing the skills and learning how to do therapy. And it's two things that AI can do so quickly, so efficiently, so effectively that we can really scale good training, good supervision, good education by giving people this opportunity to get objective feedback about therapist behaviors in the therapy session that lead to positive client outcomes. And then, based on that real-time objective feedback, provide these role-playing experiences of, okay, I wasn't so great in that moment in the session. Let's practice that over and over and over with real-time immediate feedback. That's what we need. It's too labor intensive for human supervisors to analyze every psychotherapy session, to do that deliberate practice role play. But AI is uniquely built to be able to do that. So that's one of the areas I'm really excited about, because And it's a personal kind of mission of mine because I had a difficult time in graduate school where nobody saw my tapes, nobody saw me doing therapy. Gave my subjective assessment of what was happening at the end of the week, and my supervisor said, "Sounds like you're doing great." Very subjective response, which wasn't satisfying for me and made it very hard for me to learn. So I'm hoping the next generation gets better feedback and more opportunities to practice and really build the skills. I feel I learned the book knowledge, but the skills I was lacking. So that's one area where I see great potential.
Thank you, Milena. I see questions coming in the chat. Many of them we're going to save to later, but I'm going to ask you one quick one, Milena. Someone asked about what you mean by large language models of AI. If you could just break that down so that we're level set around that.
Yeah, so AI has been around for a long time, basically computers that can do things that we once thought only humans can do. But what's most interesting, this most recent advancement, is now computers understand language and we can talk to them. And that's the large language models are like ChatGPT is an example of a large language model where we can use our words to type or talk to a computer and have it understand us.
Thank you. So there's some good stuff. It's a thrilling time and a scary time. And I also hear you all beginning to talk about some of the challenges and some of the problems. Let me go to Steven first around that. What's the downside? What are the things that are concerning and problematic?
Yeah, where do we get started? So, I mean, the first big thing is that Gen AI really came out into the public in November 2022, right? That's when ChatGPT launched. So it's only been with us a few years, but very few of us knew that it was coming, knew what it was, understood it. It was unleashed on the world as a grand experiment, including with our children. Our children are using AI. We don't know if it works. It's not designed to be therapeutic. Again, that's not how most AI is designed. So that's a downside. This is a big, risky thing that would not pass an IRB, but we're doing it on a global scale. And some other general things, of course, AI it will eliminate some jobs, and that's very clearly on the horizon. We're all aware of that. A lot of our clients are very concerned about that for their own jobs. Data centers, any tool has good and bad about it. Data centers are known to consume lots of water, lots of energy, to raise energy prices, to literally raise the temperature of the surrounding community. There's lots of downsides about data centers for the environment. AI can be used for cybercrime and espionage and sabotage, and that's a growing concern with the sophistication of AI. And of course, all of us are familiar with AI hallucinations, which is a nice way of saying that it lies to us, and it's really confident in its lies. It tells us incorrect information really confidently, which is problematic for therapy, but it's problematic for everything, and all of the AI does it. So those are just some big global concerns, and then when we talk about therapy issues, I'll talk about those later.
Thank you. Anastasia? You want to jump in on what the problems are, what the challenges are, what we need to be concerned about?
Yeah, as Stephen mentioned, the challenge is unbound. We are going into a space, a vortex of a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainties, boundaries and tests that have yet to be examined with a fine-tooth comb. But on a more practical side, as it relates to behavioral health, so check on everything Stephen said. I think that some of the lows, as based on how it has landed with such tremendous force in behavioral health, really, the lows for me, from my perspective, is the potential for synthetic relationships. And that's not just because of the potential for it to replace, but synthetic relationship, as clinicians, we know, just because somebody can access it for free. And don't get me wrong, all of my career, I have really been, and everything that I do, including my scholarship and clinical work, has been about access and equity and scale, and to get care and support to those who otherwise have no access, limited access, or have been systematically pushed out from systems due to marginalization. But just because it's available doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. And so it's very scary, the potential for synthetic relationship between AI, bots, and humans. And the emerging research is very interesting. But I think that we have to put more guardrails in than what's just interesting as a anthropological, phenomenological. We're not a spectator to this. We know we are on the front lines. We are helping support. So synthetic relationships and the potential continued rise of synthetic relationship is really concerning to me. And that's the potential of low. I think that there is a possibility for us to pump the brakes and ensure guardrails. So, I'm excited by the prospect of folks on the regulatory compliance and policy and researchers trying to slow that train down. But if we think about clinical cases where the clinical presentation is one of loneliness or attachment or relationship injuries, you could see how the connection with the bot that can absolutely be available 24/7, consistent with its care, could even be empathic. And maybe, as Milena said, more empathic and more, nicer, no ruptures than sort of a human, how the attachment could really sort of form, even with the best of intentions. And that's very scary. So when I see products that is a standalone or these point solutions outside of the system of clinical care, that's scary to me because then clients are really vulnerable to developing. One of the things that I'm hearing emerging of these point solutions is that so that the person doesn't develop dependency in this synthetic relationship. If the input from the user, from the client, is sort of such that it escalates concern and risk, they will stop. They will stop and sometimes even lock the user out. And say, like, you need to call 911, go to your nearest hospital. Well, can you imagine doing that in actual clinical sort of settings? If my client is escalating or if my client has needs outside of my scope of expertise, of course, then I have to find somebody. But I don't say, see ya, George, good luck to you. I got to cover my butt and my liability. To me, that's really scary. So the synthetic relationship, not just in terms of machines and humans developing, though I don't think that we're capturing sort of the nuances that as clinicians we know to be really essential and important. And similarly, I think the point solution part, the lack of context. ChatGPT, Claude, it's amazing in terms of what it could give. And in our discovery calls, we found that not only clients, but also providers are going to Claude and ChatGPT and so many sort of others, redacting, of course, confidential information, but, with the paucity of workforce and supervision support in the way that Milena suggested, like we want to get something so that we provide the kind of quality care to our clients. But the lack of context is really, really serious if we look into it. And most AI outputs, especially the standalones, are really context poor. And it's because they're operating outside of clinical context. And so you get a little bit more of a generic and ultimately, and because it sounds so authoritative and authoritarian at times, right? Because of sort of that, we tend to really believe the output automatically without realizing that for all of us clinicians out there, to any clinical question, right? For those people out there who are my students, ex-students, that the right clinical answer in any consultation is, that's right, it depends. Because there's so many contextual data that make it no single client with even this very similar profile has the same response. It depends. And the absence of that contextual sort of data for these standalone exchanges is really concerning because we believe we're getting good information when in fact we know based on years and decades of practice, that's not the case. So those are two things of many that are concerning for me at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Anastasia. Milena, did you want to jump in?
I'm going to take a slightly different path. and propose that one thing that may not be working is my observation among my colleagues is that there is a pattern, I think it's shifting of kind of not wanting to look into the potential of AI or wanting to, and it makes sense. It's complicated, it's hard, it's big, it's new. But a turning away or a definitive, no, this is bad. I don't want to engage. I don't want this, of course, to replace my work. Understandable. But I worry a risk is that we then miss the possibilities of we do have this new technology. What is its potential to support our work and to support client outcomes and to help more people? I don't want us to lose track of that. Our general outcomes with clients have been stagnant for many decades. That's concerning. So I I guess the invitation for what's not working and how to shift it is how can we move forward with more curiosity about, oh my goodness, here is this new technology entering our field. It is impacting every area of our life, every field, that it is our responsibility to think about how might we use this for good. It's very easy to go down the worst case scenario path, but what's the possibility here? How do we get involved, which speaks to another area of what's not working or a concern is that there are a lot of new AI companies building mental health products, building educational tools for clinical training that are built by entrepreneurs and built by technicians without clinicians and folks with domain expertise on the team. So that's a concern for me. How do we bridge these worlds? How do we connect the entrepreneurs with and those with the tech expertise and the AI expertise with the providers? That is a piece that I think is still very much in development and not happening at the scale I would like to see it happening.
Thank you. A couple of things have popped up in the chat about consent. Who has the privilege? HIPAA. Where are we at right now around that cluster of issues around consent and confidentiality and HIPAA regulations?
Yes, very much our responsibility as clinicians, if we are using AI tools, to be very clear and transparent with our clients, describing exactly what tools we're using, how data is stored, where the liability is, that clients are fully understanding what they are consenting to. Yes, there are many HIPAA compliant tools. Many of the, note-taking software, session summary software is all HIPAA compliant at this point. Yes, so really important. It's our primary responsibility to, protect patients' data and their confidentiality. So we want to be smart in any AI tools that we're using, that we are protecting client data, that clients are giving us consent, that if we are using general purpose large language models like Claude or ChatGPT, that we are de-identifying client information, just like if we were to speak about a client in a public setting, we would never want to give any identifying information. So similarly, when we are using, I use ChatGPT personally, and I use it for, clinical brainstorming and consultation and how am I thinking about this session? Am I missing anything? Can I role play this intervention? I want to be careful about sharing any personal information there.
And I would add to that, as clinicians and as clinicians who are talking hopefully with our students and clients sort of about this, to really look underneath the hood of products that they might be using. All the free versions are really, they're training on your data. And so if you are looking at clinical products and clinical platforms to ensure that they are HIPAA compliant, but that they are also advancing towards things like SOC 2, which is third-party audit, to ensure that you are, in fact, as a product, doing what you're saying you're going to do, having third-party audits. As I've been building with our sort of platform, things, real risks such as cybersecurity, which is a growing area as concerned. So it felt really imperative that we are working and partnering with very seasoned cybersecurity folks to not just do the very bare minimum, but because this is PHI, this is protected health information, and this is a vulnerable population on the whole in terms of who we're serving, that we do due diligence on all levels above and beyond meeting minimum requirements. And that the stuff that you're using behind, beneath the hood are also that companies have signed BAAs, that there's zero data retention, all of those things. And so in order for us to be able to discern and decide whether something is safe enough for our own professional use or for that of our client, we need, I forget whether it was Steven or Milena, we need some AI literacy.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is not like this is bad, uniformly this is sort of bad. It's like it is, there's a lot of scary aspects sort of this. And at some point, we've got to roll up our sleeve and we have to be able to discern what is the bad and what part of it will I be able to sort of leverage here, and in what ways. How do I get part of a discussion that doesn't shut conversations like these down because they abound. And it's not a matter of when the AI comes to behavioral health, which is what's mind-boggling to me. It's here. So it's like, what do you do just in case? It's here, it's everywhere. And the person who says, I'm not using AI, I'm like, are you kidding? It is embedded in everything. If you're a Gmail user, it's there. If you're Googling something, it's already there. And so I think just putting our head in the sand is not the answer. So I always look forward to platforms and opportunities like this to have vigorous debate and discussions, because I think it's only in an exchange such as this that we're going to be moving towards something that feels truly equitable, truly sort of access, where it includes all folks in all the ways that they need and deserve.
You're going to jump in, Steven?
Oh, sure. Where do I start with this? If I'll transition to the risks here in terms of therapy. All of us on this call know about the lawsuits against ChatGPT. This is literally a life or death issue that we're talking about, right? People have died by suicide. People have harmed other people because of AI, and it's being ascribed to AI, and there are lawsuits about that. And part of the problem is that extra empathy, the sycophancy that AI exudes. Would be great if you're just trying to get people to engage and to profit from that. It's not great if somebody's endorsing things that are really about self-harm or other harm, and you're endorsing that. You're encouraging that, which is what AI has done in the past. So all of that is topmost concern. In terms of privacy confidentiality, yes, we need to think about HIPAA. Yes, we need to think about business associate agreements. But I want us to think about beyond that a little bit too, the worst case scenarios, which is that you've done all your homework, you've researched this company, it's a great company, great ratings, great security, great encryption, great firewall, and then they get hacked. And then all of your clients' most private data is gone and it's out there forever. That's bad. Or think about this, like kind of a 23andMe analogy. You've done all your research, you've got this great company, and your company goes bankrupt and gets bought out by another company with totally different policies, totally different agreements. That can happen. So confidentiality is loose with AI in lots of ways. Deep fakes are a huge concern. Deep fakes can be used to generate childhood sexual abuse material, and it can also be used for blackmail and intimate partner violence. So that's a whole other issue of AI. Parasocial relationships like AI companions can be wonderful, but also can be awful. A lot of them are out there literally claiming that they're licensed therapists and licensed psychologists without the training. They are not trained on what we are trained on. Another really fascinating issue to me is grief bots, sometimes called death bots. This idea that you can take the digital footprint of a person that has passed away and bring them back to life virtually, and have them send you text messages with the emojis they used to use. That's fascinating and horrifying. It's haunting. And worse than that, you think about the people that are signing up for subscriptions like this are the people who are bereaved, the people who are grieving, and that's exploitive to take advantage of them, make them pay for that, and then take that away if they don't pay their monthly bill. Like all of that's really complicated, but also there's some evidence that it might be helpful to people who are grieving. And so again, we want to be open, but we also want to think about guardrails. We are the best people to be thinking about this. I'll touch on a couple of other things, which is that AI is not a person. AI can not be sued itself. Of course, the technology, it's not a thing. We personalize it. We anthropomorphize AI a lot, and the companies encourage that. But this is just code. This is just probability. This is just autocorrect on steroids is what AI is. That's all it is. Because of that, it's not trained on ethical guidelines typically, or what we do, the nuanced things that we do as therapists. One of the AIs famously a few months ago recommended that a client in drug recovery take a small hit of meth to get through the week. They don't know better because it's just probability. It's just code. Two other things I'll mention, which is that AI could help with mental health potentially, and there's some evidence for that for AI that's trained to do that. But it could also increase social stigma, right? If somebody is spending a lot of time with an AI companion, that means there's a response cost. They're not spending time with real people, and they're not going out in the world. That's a big issue. And then finally, I'll mention that although this has the potential, all of these technologies have the potential to increase access, and we need literally twice as many therapists as we have in the United States to meet the demand for mental health treatment. So that's good, and including marginalized communities. The downside is that there's less access for marginalized communities. Literally, the internet doesn't work as well in some communities, as we all know. There is bias inherent in AI, depends on how it's trained. And we all have heard those stories about how it's biased against people of color, for example. So again, lots of potential upsides, but there are lots of things to be concerned about.
Want to invite Milena, Anastasia, I don't know if you might have comments, reactions to what your colleague is sharing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm getting scared. I mean, the pull to be like, oh my gosh, run away is just like constantly sort of there to be activated. Just in my own professional work, but as Milena mentioned, like there is nothing, no sector of society professional work that hasn't been touched. I have two college age, kids, and they're like, "Mom, should I?" I'm like, "I don't know." There's AI disruptions here, there, sort of everywhere. I will say this, as I was listening to you, sort of, Stephen, it's true. Like everything, the news about the gross, egregious, sort of, often sometimes sort of horrifying consequences of AI engagement with a clinical sample has been very devastating. And so this isn't in defense of AI unilaterally. And I also want to provide a sober reminder that humans, as human clinicians, and the human clinical, it's not like up to this point we have been infallible, and that there's been no ruptures, no violations ethically, that there hasn't been some, sometimes even horrible things that happen even under human care. So that, again, I want to underscore that's not a defense of now let's jump ship and welcome our new buddy AI. Not at all. But I think we have to be very sober, very thoughtful, very intentional, and dive deep so that we're able to hold the nuance, the textures, sometimes the contradictions, and what Milena said earlier about really having a cross-disciplinary team where you have subject domain experts in addition to, talented technologists, in addition to people who are deep in cybersecurity, to policy and regulatory, really a much more interdisciplinary team. The risk mitigation, the risk is I don't think, even for people who are not following AI closely, it's front news all the time. But I do have faith that risk mitigation is possible. And I think that's also based on the work that I'm doing. And I feel like just because what I'm learning and what I'm trying to adopt for what I'm building is that the safest mental health AI system isn't necessarily the most powerful. We think about like, and it could do this, and it could do this, and guess what Anthropic came out with? And it's not the most powerful. The best and the safest, in my opinion, that I'm learning, and based on my emerging learnings, is that it is AI systems that are most constrained, that are most accountable, and that it is most intentionally designed to keep the humans in the center of care. And we know that to be what has accounted for the greatest amount of variance in therapy efficacy based on hundreds and hundreds of therapy. So human oversight is essential. Strong data security is essential. Constrained AI is essential. And designing against dependency is essential.
Thank you. Milena, do you have thoughts, things you wanted to put on the table related to what you're hearing, what's being discussed?
Yeah, I think one of the pieces I'll add that we haven't spoken to yet is around AI in the classroom, back to teaching, clinical knowledge, clinical skills. What does it mean when we can go to AI for the answers to all of our questions? When AI has the ability to diagnose more accurately than humans, to formulate cases, to provide treatment plans more accurately than we can, more quickly than we can. What should we be teaching students is one big question for this new world. What are the parts that AI can do better than us? And how do we merge our human skills with AI skills? But also, how do we protect students' learning? I spoke earlier about AI's great potential to support learning, but for everything, there's a flip side where you can use it in a way that limits or gets in the way of learning. And so I think higher education and education in general is trying to figure out how do we reconfigure our teaching, our assignments, our ways of supporting students and guiding them to use AI in a way that is really advantageous and not preventing them from learning the important skills we want them to have to be able to judge AI outputs. Are they still developing critical thinking skills? What's the foundation of knowledge they need to have to be able to work well with AI? I think there's potential for AI, to offload some of the heavy cognitive load in a good way. I don't memorize where I drive anymore. I use Google Maps. Great. I don't feel bad about that. But are there pieces of our domain expertise and learning that we are offloading that's not so good? I'm not sure. We are still, I think, trying to investigate what is most important for our students to know for this future that is unknown. It's a tricky time in education.
Mhm. We're going to segue in a moment to Q&A. We've got stuff coming in the chat. I have one sort of quick question before that, which is AI showing up in the curriculum? I hear that it sounds like it's showing up in terms of simulations, but is it showing up sort of, I like your term, Anastasia, AI literacy. Is that showing up in a sort of deliberate attempt to assure that students are getting degrees in psychology, clinical counseling, other professional psychology areas are becoming literate about AI and the ups, the downs, the possibilities, the problems? Is that happening?
I mean, in my opinion, unfortunately not. Very little, if not any. I don't think, I submit, I don't think that's just my own academic institutions. I follow, variety of different professional community listservs among faculty and administrators across the country. And I think to this point, it's been like, how do we get our students to not use AI? Can we adopt the best AI detector, police whether they've used AI? And so I'm beginning to see a little shift in tide in some of those national and local conversations. And I think it's about time. I feel like the reality check is not whether our clients or our students are using AI. They are already. The question is no longer part of that, but rather I think the question really should be, how do we teach ourselves and our clients and our sort of students to responsibly use it within our clinical care systems, within our sort of training systems? And I would submit that if we don't do that, then they are severely in the deficit and being left behind, not to even have vocabulary to understand and have conversation. I think I would submit it wouldn't be really responsible for those of us trying to shepherd the next generation. I'm in my mid-career, so I could be like, I'm not doing that. Let me just do what I usually do, paper and pencil and maybe Google Drive. But maybe I could wrap up my career sort of with that. Incidentally, Google Drive is also not safe, right? Everything is hackable, right? We're all sort of all vulnerable. But I think that it's not responsible to not have these conversations, and for that to be planted, and to have vigorous conversations, to have constructive conversations about this, so that our students are also invited not only just to be the consumers of products that are being built, but to invoke a little bit of what Milena said earlier, so that they could also position themselves as clinical leaders at the intersection of tech and behavioral health. And for that to not be overrepresented by just the pure entrepreneurs trying to make gains out of people suffering.
Thank you for that. Thank you all. This has been so rich. I'm going to hand the baton to Valen, who's been sifting through the chat and will helm this next part of our session.
Kamea, thank you very much. Now, there are some really good and some deeper questions here. My goal is to try to tease a few of these out in sort of summary fashion. And we've got about 5 or 6 that we'll see how this works in terms of timing. We want to give at least 10 minutes to be able to do some Q&A. The first question, summarizing, is sort of along these lines. Is there a risk of therapists essentially gifting the craft of psychotherapy to large language model AI in a way that if it's not in a bounded environment, and those large language model AIs are learning all of the things that occur in therapeutic settings, that it could in fact be trained to replace the work of psychotherapists in human form?
I'll just say certainly that can happen. And of course, there are companies that profit off our data every day. Probably all of us are experiencing that every day. It depends on the wording of the agreement. And so some of the companies do that and some of the companies don't do that. And so you want to read the end user agreement that none of us read. Of course, that could be for a good thing. Again, if we're designing things to be therapeutic, we might choose to do that so that we can train up really good models that are going to actually be helpful to people too. So there's that tension. These language models that record sessions, AI scribes, the typical way of doing it is recording it, and then you could make a progress note like a SOAP note. You can analyze it. You can do all these things. One of the models that I really like is what is called an ephemeral recording, which means that it records it, it does the analyses, it does the summary, and then it deletes the recording immediately. And you can have the therapist go in there and make sure manually that that's true too. So I really like that model, so that the company's not getting it, nobody's getting it, it's gone. So that's kind of a nice model for that.
Do folks generally agree with that, or any additional nuance?
I was saying that I'm actually having this debate with a number of other folks just about the idea of the phenomenon of ethereal recording, and then it's gone. Is that part of clinical data or sort of like a record or not? Do we keep it per California? I mean, we're in California standards by sort of 7 years, and 7 years post 18-year mark, and etc. What part of it? And so it's like, and even friends at APA and the board are like, I don't know. Everyone says it depends. But what I said to my point earlier, we're all trying to fly the plane while we're building it. And so it is both very incredibly frustrating, and also I think it presents I'll just insert my own CBT cognitive reframe. It's distressing, and also it could be, I think, a really wonderful and exciting opportunity to co-lead and co-build and inform and influence policy and regulation and compliance. Just because it's always been the case on all fronts doesn't mean that it doesn't require and doesn't deserve and doesn't need to be tweaked. All the systems that we have been operating under.
Okay, a simpler question as a bit of a follow-up on this one, and this is really kind of a factual question. In the context of therapy, are clients explicitly consenting to be recorded in these settings?
They should be. We absolutely should be asking clients, and I think Dr. Esherick said this earlier, we have to be explicit in saying how we're using AI in our therapy, in our assessments too. So we should absolutely be doing that. There's a lawsuit happening right now in San Diego, actually, about this very issue, saying that a medical patient was not asked for consent and then found all this data that had been generated by AI. This is going to be a growing concern, but absolutely all of us need to get consent from our clients.
And I think that consent should happen if you are on a platform, whether it's an EHR platform or other platform or a product. That should be at the entry when you sign up. That should be at when you introduce anything that is AI generated. I think platforms that allow the provider or the administrator to be able to easily toggle on and off a variety of different features versus defaulting to everything is sort of AI is also providing influence and the power of control within the human, which is, I think, really imperative. So whenever you enable any additional aspects, then there should also be a pop-up window or a verbal acknowledgement and reminder requesting consent for certain AI capabilities. So I think it's not a one shot, it's a multi. And we know that better than anyone. I mean, we do confidentiality in the very beginning. And then if a client at some point down the line shares something that you think might be potentially reportable, you remind them the limits of our relationship. And so we know that. So how do we translate some of our tremendous knowing and learning into a slightly different sphere?
And this is a specific competency that I think therapists need to develop. How do we talk about educating our clients so that they can give informed consent? We need to understand AI at a basic level to be able to explain what's happening. We need to understand data privacy and what's happening to the data at a basic level. That's a competency skill that we can teach and practice as this next generation is moving into the field.
And then a question that I think came from some alum too, are training programs actually starting to really incorporate education around the use of AI in these clinical sort of PhD and PsyD level programs nowadays?
I would say, as Dr. Kim mentioned earlier, a lot of the attitude has been, how can we catch people using AI and how do we forbid it? And I think that's very short-sighted and very limited. So I think at that level, it's in our curriculum, it's on our syllabi. So we say, don't cheat, don't use AI, or you can use it in these circumstances. That's the most formal way that it's in our curriculum. Outside of our curriculum, for example, here on our campus, we have a generative AI council that's been meeting for a couple of years. I'm doing a 5-hour training on AI and mental health. So there's lots of informal ways, but it's not usually part of our curriculum except to forbid it mostly.
Yeah, and I would say at my institution and former institution, there's a great range among the faculty of really explicit guidance not to use AI versus discussion and sessions, modules on here's how AI is being used in this context, or here's how you might use AI with this assignment. So it's very individual. It's not formally integrated into the curriculum yet, but I think our professional organizations are developing competencies. There are schools, Centio University is one of them that has developed competencies. It's open source, it's free. Anybody can go there and see an example and modify it for their context. But, it's not uncommon for educational institutions to be a bit behind the times of what's happening in the real world right now. We're catching up and we need to come to agreement, and that's hard to do amongst a group of faculty often.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Um,
Normal.
is anybody starting to see AI addiction issues?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, AI, social, it's all designed to be addictive. Even for those of us who are measured and grounded and sober in, our understanding and the potential, both the potential and the limitations. It is by design very addictive. And so, yeah, I'm talking, my area is particularly with teens and families and young people, and getting a lot of solicitation from organizations and families and other groups asking, can you talk and can you address on sort of the growing AI addiction? When we say people are turning to ChatGPT and other AI for emotional support. That includes kids. That includes, the those who are particularly vulnerable. The epidemic of loneliness also, I think, is such that it makes it easier to go to AI versus maybe sometimes even humans and peers if you're talking about young people. So yeah, the addiction is real, and the potential for it to skyrocket, I think, is also real. So more the reason for us to become more AI literate and get into the to this work on all fronts. I'll just put a plug for APA. I've been very encouraged that APA last year in February 2025 actually told Arthur Evans this. I'm like, I've been a long time APA member, and this is one of the first times that I've been really excited about. Oh, this is being recorded. So, anyways, so been
Case in
excited,
point.
mixed bag over
Let the
30
record
years.
show that Dr.
Let
Kim. Yeah.
the record show that sometimes I renewed my membership and sometimes I didn't. But last year, when they came out with APA Labs to really bring, entrepreneurs, innovators, and clinicians, and Tanya Carlson and Guillermo Correa, and also even Bernadette Hahn, doing that on the education front. So even though some of our all institutions are lagging behind. I feel like, if you look at all the local, national, and state organizations, this topic is front in mind, and a lot of folks are giving time and webinars and CEs and other types of resources and training. So I feel hopeful that will have a good influence on our respective institutions.
Kumea, let me ask one more question because I'm keeping an eye on the clock here as well. And it really is about the tools. Specifically, they're asking what are essentially, from a clinical and ethical standpoint, what are some of the best AI tools for use in therapeutic contexts? I think this is new to a lot of folks, but you've mentioned that there are some that have those policies, guardrails, protections, that type of thing. Would you guys mind sharing just a few specific tools that maybe come to mind?
I'll just say it real quickly. Therabot is the therapeutic product of AI that's been designed with CBT in mind, and it's been designed by people like us. Most of the companies to generate an AI large language model is very expensive because it sucks in all of American, all of the human productivity over all these years. And the metric that most of the companies are guided by is the bottom line. It's profit. It doesn't have to be that way. And so there are some things like Therabot that were really designed for therapeutic purposes. And then for the between session things, there's Couch Loop, which is one of those ephemeral recordings that I spoke about. That's a really nice tool.
I'll add that the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association have rubrics for vetting different apps, and they have lists of kind of ones that have already been vetted. So those are good resources to explore and think of, if you are considering a new tool, what you might want to evaluate.
Of course, I'm excited about the product that I'm building,
Fair.
which is not a point solution. So RE Care, what we're building is actually not a single product or point solution for between sessions or for some other sort of aspect, but rather it is an AI native operating system for the entire mental health ecosystem. So our users who we partner with is not the clients themselves, but are with the supervisor, administrator, and providers. And what we're solving for is the fragmentation that is emerging, that is existing in the system, just like point solution, one for this and one for that, one for scribe, one for this, and one for between sessions, one for mood logging. And we're bringing all that workflow, all those responsibilities, and all the personas in the entire mental health ecosystem onto one platform using a single shared data loop so that everyone can benefit from that contextual data and background that I mentioned. So it is not to support synthetic relationship, but absolutely to keep the human and human expert and the human relationship in the center.
All right, and I'm looking at the clock here too, Kamea. So I'm thinking, shall we open this up for the panelists? If you all have any final thought or thing you'd like to share, maybe it's a hope for the future in this regard, whatever it may be, we wanted to just take a moment to see if you had any kind of concluding thoughts you would like to share.
I'll start with the invitation to ask your clients, ask your students how they're using AI right now, what's working, what's not working, just to be practical, staying in the moment, in the here and now, what's happening, and let's be curious and learn from each other. It's a whole new world. So that's my invitation.
I'll say all of us know that you can use AI to summarize meetings like this one. What some people don't know is that you can ask it to be funny, and it is truly funny. Like AI can be really funny. That's kind of the thing that blows my mind the most about AI these days. It can be truly funny and make music and lots of other things.
I would say, since I think we're talking to mostly, folks of clinicians, I believe that if we do this well, as clinical psychologists, as mental health professionals, AI doesn't replace us. It gives us, in my opinion, greater capacity for precision. It gives us capacity for more insight, and it gives us more capacity to do what actually drives change, and that is the human relationship. And I feel very hopeful about that, even as threats abound. That's what I'm sticking to, and that's what I am hoping to continue to support.
Thank you. Here's what I'd like to do, Kamea. I'm going to ask you if you have any final comment on this. But in the meantime, Milena, I know you had a query that you were thinking that we could put in front of the audience as we get towards our conclusion here. I would invite you to add that to the chat field if you're able to do so. In the meantime, we have another poll question we'll come to at the very end in just a moment. But Kamea, any final thoughts from your point of view?
I am so grateful to Milena and Anastasia and Steven. This has been very illuminating for me, someone who knows very little bit about the interface of AI and therapy. And so thank you for bringing your wisdom, your expertise, your energy. It's pushed me to try to become more AI literate. Thank you.
And so, Milena, you've put a query in the chat field in terms of a training query around students. And so, folks, I want to give you a moment just to take a look at that in the chat field. While you do that, and you can pull that, if you click on the hyperlink, it'll bring up a page on your browser, so you'll have it after the session ends as well. Also, we have one question for the attendees. And Ava, if you would, we're going to pull up just one quick live poll question, because your input after a session like this helps shape what we talk about next and how we go about planning for next sessions in these live panel salons. So Ava, when you have a chance, if you would bring that up. And this is, okay, so I see it a little bit differently from you all as a host, but basically the query here, what specific aspects of the use of AI in the context of this session today, highs and lows of emerging use, what would you really like to know more about? So it's an open text query that will give us just some additional input in terms of what resonates for you and what you might like to dive deeper into. Now, this is the live query portion. Okay. However, all of the attendees will also receive, if you signed up to be here, which you probably did because you have the link, we have your email address, and we're going to use that tomorrow. Reggie will send out essentially a follow-up poll from today's session. Basically, how did it work for you? What did you learn? What do you think? What recommendations do you have for us around future sessions as well? So both this live data here that you can answer while we're together and tomorrow's email poll will both give us some really good feedback to be able to help craft future sessions to make sure that we're really touching on the things that matter most to our audience. And that is extremely helpful. So we'll leave that up on the screen. I see we've got about 8 or 9 responses so far. We'll keep it up for another moment or two here. And again, feel free to click on Milena's in the chat field as well. But last but not least, I just want to thank everybody for being a part of this. You know, when you're dealing with emerging technology and questions along these lines, again, that is ubiquitous in terms of how we see it, how we hear about it in so many different contexts. Really thinking about this in the context of therapists and their clients is time very well spent, especially for many of the alums and folks affiliated with the universities that are here today. And we appreciate your attention. We appreciate your participation. And I would echo again, Anastasia, Milena, and Steven, guys, great content, great wisdom to be able to share. Kumeya, thank you for moderating. And we really appreciate everybody being a part of this today. The recording will also be up on the YouTube channel for the Alliant Ed Foundation. Reggie has posted that in the chat field. We'll have it up probably early next week. We know there's folks that were not able to make it for the live session, and we look forward to be able to share that back for folks to be able to, glean what you may not have gotten quickly in the conversation today, but also those who couldn't be live with us to be a part of the session asynchronously. So thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.